Hello, everyone. My name is Gitika Gorsi, and today I am very honored to be interviewing a very special space champion, Mr. John Hines. Mr. Hines is the go-to person for thinking creatively about how to best use space-related technologies to reach students. He founded a foundation, the Hines Family Foundation, which is focused on serving underserved students. He was a real pathfinder in the use of CubeSats for space R&D, including the biomedical area. Previously, he was the Center Chief Technologist at NASA Ames Research Center, where he did some amazing work. I'm so excited to be able to understand Mr. Hines' journey and his work in further depth. Welcome, Mr. Hines. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to conduct this interview.
Katika, thank you so much. It's an honor and a pleasure to be able to chat about one of my favorite subjects and to, just sort of describe some of the wonderful experiences that I've had that I really would love to share and make sure that it it continues. So very happy to be here.
Thank you. Before we get into understanding your journey of what really led you into space, first, could you tell us more about your typical day? What do you currently do and how does it run?
It's very interesting. You'll find this very interesting. I retired from NASA in December of 2012. And when I retired, I moved to Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. So I reside in Puerto Vallarta for 8 months out of the year and 4 months out of the year in San Jose, California. And while here, I manage two major activities. My consulting activity, JH Technology Associates, which still consults with NASA and sort of imparts and tries to convey some of the lessons I've learned in program and project management, technology development, and so forth. And then the Hines Family Foundation, which is the subject of our discussion today. So I manage all of those virtually. JHTA is based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and HFF is based in Atlanta, Georgia. And I manage those virtually from here in Puerto Vallarta. So my day generally starts in the morning. I call it from the recumbent office because I do a lot of my emails and my literature searching and my catch up on information and sort of thinking before I actually start the full active day. And then during the rest of the day, it's pretty much consumed with lots of virtual meetings, Zoom and other online media to communicate with multiple collaborators and team members and participants around the country and, if, in fact, around the world. So it's a pretty involved day, but it's really interesting trying to handle it from remotely. So the hands-on capabilities that I would normally have and the face-to-face interactions, I'm having to do that across multiple time zones and virtually, and it's really become interesting and a way of life.
Yeah, definitely. I think the pandemic has allowed us to connect with more individuals across the world in different time zones. It's really fun and crazy. So I'm really interested in learning about your inspiration behind founding the Hines Family Foundation. I know, when it comes to having that inspiration and motivation, there's probably a backstory to it. So could you share it with us?
Oh, interesting. Thank you for asking that question. It really is an interesting story. Okay, so first, let me just say I'm an only child with no children. And so I've had so many experiences, as you see from the background here, lived in many places, learned a lot of things, worked in a lot of places, really wanted to, make sure that the experiences that I've shared can be conveyed and can continue on and can be passed on to whatever I call what might be my legacy, if you will. And so after retiring, I started, as I said, the consulting, and I started to interact with various companies and organizations. I got asked to participate on several boards of technology boards and advisory boards, and one of which was a workforce development company called Base 11, based in Southern California in the Irvine, California, Orange County area. And their whole idea was to convey and help students get through the workforce and get into the workforce by participating with, in their case, UC Irvine in Southern California, to learn and have special academies and at in-person activities. So I had asked them, what about doing this targeted in the South area? Because one of their foci was to support underserved and underrepresented students. And with the big population in the South, and myself coming from originally Alabama, a graduate of Tuskegee, Alabama, a resident of Tuskegee uh, in Alabama, and that I asked, well, why not do it in the South? And he said, yeah, we're going to do that eventually. And I said, well, maybe I'll do it myself. So in 2016, I went to a family reunion for the first time in 25 years and saw all the kids and the grandkids and the family there and everybody there. And at the banquet, at the culmination of the reunion, there were all these testimonials and people standing up talking about things. And I looked over at my wife, didn't say a word to her, and jumped up, grabbed the mic, and said, I'm going to start a foundation. And now here I am. Okay. And the inspiration is to share a lot of those experiences and to help to convey that and to get more people who don't have access to the kinds of experiences and exposure that I've been exposed to be able to become viable contributors and participants in the 21st century revolutionary workforce.
Very, very inspirational. I know myself when it comes to finding, there's always that moment, when I was founding IgnitedThinkers, it was just like a small discussion that I was like, okay, I'm going to do it. And I'm sure as your story showed, it was like that one moment. It's so inspirational to hear that story, that personal connection you had, and how you're trying to give back to your community. It's really an inspiration for all of us. So thank you for sharing that story.
My pleasure.
Yeah, and I'm curious to hear, what is your vision? What is the future you see for your foundation? Do you hope to grow it and expand it further? What are some goals you guys have?
Well, we are evolving. When I started the foundation, I really didn't know what I was talking about. I know I wanted to share my experiences. I wanted to convey that and to assist. The original idea was to identify promising high school juniors and seniors, pre-college students as they got ready to enter the academic uh, sector and get them prepared and ready and assist them to get through the academic pipeline and get them into the 21st century workforce to be viable contributors so that they know they didn't go in having book learning, if you will, and without practical experience, to give them the experiential learning experiences so that when they got out and got into the workforce, they could become immediate contributors. So I started that with that idea of the focus of the foundation. Well, I myself got quickly educated that if you don't identify students at the middle school level and even at the upper elementary school level and get them interested and motivated to start the learning experiences and start being exposed to the technologies and to the possibilities and what can be done so that they want to study and apply themselves so that they are ready to go into flagship universities like Georgia Tech, like Stanford, like MIT, and others, of how to get them ready there. So from the original point of starting at academic level and getting them through the academic pipeline, we evolved to the STEM K-12 pathway in order to prepare them to get them into that level, and then finally to help them and assist them in their early career and returning careers to be viable contributors to the 21st century workforce revolution.
Yeah, it's very important to target those young students and get those passions. I know students who have wanted to become astronauts ever since they're little, and they achieve those goals because they have that vision and that passion. So definitely, kind of like helping those young students realize what they love to do and providing that pathway at a young age is very important. So I'm glad that your organization is focusing on that. My next question for you is, your role at NASA Ames Center probably allowed you to be a part of amazing projects. So could you share, if possible, one or two research projects that were your most favorite that you were involved in?
Oh boy, I tell you, you sent me these notes and these questions earlier, and I thought about this, and I've had so many exciting projects and experiences and so many firsts, if you will, not to be presumptive or bragging, but had been a part, not because of myself, but because of many wonderful people that I've worked with and worked for and have worked in support of and give me guidance and vision and support. But I could identify several major projects that I think that would be of interest among many. I mean, I could show you lots. You see here on my list here of, I could show you things of what I've done in the workforce and kind of things that I've studied and so forth in that evolution. But you know, uh, I think some of the things that are most important to me are some of the things that we did that were the very first ever uh, activities that brought together multidisciplinary teams and young and older people together as integrated multidisciplinary, in fact, multinational teams do certain things. So one, I would say the first one was, let's say, Cosmos 1514. Cosmos 1514 was a spaceflight mission, a life sciences biological flight spaceflight mission that flew on the Russian Biocosmos satellite in 1983, December, to be exact, December 6th, 1983. And it was the first time that primates had been flown fully instrumented in order to measure their physiologic response in the space environment. And to do that, we had to design and develop the instruments, the sensors, the measurement techniques, the processes, the technologies, the spaceflight hardware, and then take it to Russia and train the Russian scientists in how to use it and apply it and show them how to fly it and to convey the mission into a successful mission. And we did that in the period from starting in 1980 to 1983, and we flew that first mission in 1983. We flew then, after then, several successive missions based on that initial point in 1985 and 2016, yes, 2016 and so forth. So that was one major biological and biomedical. And in that point, we were doing cardiovascular research and understanding the effect of spaceflight on the cardiovascular system by measuring carotid pressure and flow in the organism as they were exposed to the spaceflight experiment. We designed the sensors, designed the capabilities, designed the processes, designed the test equipment, the instruments, everything. And again, as I said, we trained the Russian scientists and technologists in how to do that and did a successful joint international mission, which was the first of several that we did as part of an ongoing program that had been conducted between NASA and Russia. The second one I would say that's as significant to me was GeneSat. And GeneSat was the first nanosatellite biological scientific spaceflight mission using nanosatellites. And nanosatellites are, in this case, it was a 3U size nanosatellite about the size of a loaf of bread that flew genetically engineered yeast to look at the effect of spaceflight exposure to biological organisms. And in that, based evolved from interactions that I'd had with DARPA in the late 1990s and understanding how they were looking at biological fluidics and biological systems and in vitro fluidic technology, some of the things that were revolutionary at that time. By being exposed to that, we were able to come back and convince NASA to allow us to try it as the first time ever in a scientific mission of that type. Heretofore, most of the biological missions had been to take samples to space, expose them to the space and environment, bring them back to Earth, and evaluate the data and the samples that brought back. This was the first time a completely autonomous in vitro system was done in space, totally bioanalytical autonomous system there in space. And it was the first of a long succession of biological nanosatellite missions that NASA Ames initially started, but also it showed to NASA and to the satellite world that these small platforms that had originally been designed as university aerospace engineering learning tools that had viable possibilities for doing real low-cost scientific research. And that revolution has now continued and has evolved into the full nanosatellite revolution that I think we were major contributors to its evolution. The next mission I would say is TechEdSat, was another nanosatellite that was a technology and educational satellite that was uh, involved taking a group of San Jose State University student interns and putting them together with NASA mentors and having them develop a small CubeSat, a 1U CubeSat, which is like a 4-inch or 10 centimeter cube device that was one of the first nanosatellites or CubeSats that was deployed from the International Space Station. And now you may hear of many satellite missions that now use the launch them up, take them up to the ISS, and then deploy them from the ISS. But TechEdSat was one of the first three ever flown in that area. And I think the other most exciting project that I'm working on now is just the whole aspect of the Hines Family Foundation, which is what allows us to now take those experiences and find ways to impart that knowledge and experiences to the next generation of space technologists and researchers, and not just space, but just technologists in general, such that they are able to build on experiential learning experiences in order to help them advance their careers. So I think those are several of the others. I could go on and on and on about many of those, but those are three really significant ones that stand out for me.
Yeah, those are some incredible projects that probably have shaped and defined the research that continued afterwards. And it's so amazing and fascinating to see the research that's being conducted and how we're able to identify different biomarkers for different factors and space flight versus ground control. So it's amazing to see the different research projects that you've worked on. And so my next question for you is a little bit back to your own journey. Did you always imagine yourself going into the space industry and working at NASA one day, or did you have some twists and turns in your journey that define who you are today?
Another great question. So, as I mentioned, I grew up in Tuskegee, Alabama. I'm an undergraduate working in electrical engineering at Tuskegee University. At one point in my engineering career, I became somewhat disillusioned with engineering, and I was thinking of doing other activities. I had the benefit of having a couple of co-op experiences with IBM, one in Burlington, Vermont in 1970. And then in 1971, again in IBM in Lexington, Kentucky, where I got exposed to hands-on, real-world experiential opportunities to do hands-on engineering. So it wasn't just the book learning that I had, but I also got exposure to, real hands-on and why it mattered and why the things I was studying mattered. So that convinced me that engineering was something I was really interested in. But I came back and I managed to get a job as an electronics technician in a cardiovascular research lab at Tuskegee, where they were doing baseline research on cardiovascular imaging and cardiovascular physiology. And in this particular case, they were designing what they call field coils, which were electromagnetic sensors that were implanted across the heart and would measure the distance and the displacement as the heart beat. And then as part of that, looking at pressure and flow, taking sensors to measure flow, pressure and flow, which allows you to understand cardiac performance in real-time operation. And so that exposure convinced me that, wow, maybe I want to be a biomedical engineer. So in looking at that and being able to build the sensors, to develop the instrument, to have hands-on experience and be the technician, operate the equipment that I hand built during real research experiences that essentially contributed to the body of knowledge that led to ultrasound and to cardiac dimensions. And now it's done with MRI and imaging and things like this. But at that time, this was the baseline kind of capability, and some of the original research with Dr. Ed Hawthorne from Howard University in Washington, that was a pioneer of that did his research at Tuskegee with veterinary school at Tuskegee University. That set me off of a career that I wanted to be a biomedical engineer for the rest of my life. So I went and by some twist of fate or fortune, I got accepted to Stanford University and for a master's degree in engineering. And I went there to I wanted to get a degree in biomedical engineering. At that time, there were only 2 or 3 universities in the country in 1971 or 72 that had biomedical engineering majors. So I went to Stanford, and I was advised that maybe you should get your degree in electrical engineering because we don't know how well this biomedical field is going to evolve. And so I took X number of courses in double E and X number of courses in medical electronics and biomedical kinds of stuff. One course was the difference. You took one course over, got a degree in biomedical engineering, one course that
Oh.
was the degree in electrical engineering. So I took the one course in electrical, get the degree in electrical engineering.
Mhm.
And at that time, uh, in looking at what I was going to do with my master's project, someone suggested that I go out to NASA Ames and talk to the people there. And I got to mention, you also had a question about mentors. I got to meet one of the first of my uh, successive mentors, Dr. Sal Rossitano there, who exposed me to biomedical research and science being done at NASA in support of the space program. And that led me to think about space. I actually got a contract at NASA Ames to do biomedical research with Stanford Research Institute, which was another SRI International, which was another part of uh, my career evolution there as a research engineer while I was getting my master's there. And I got to actually do real spaceflight type research work at a space center. And that got me interested in NASA and space at that time. I was also an Air Force ROTC officer, and I went to Vandenberg Air Force Base as an electronic systems engineer in computation and communications on launch vehicles and a launch facility at Vandenberg. And I then got uh, applied to and got accepted at a program called the Laboratory Associates Program, which was a program where they took Air Force officers and put them into a NASA, uh, detailed them to a NASA program for supposedly 2 years to learn how NASA does research and does programs with the idea of bringing that back to the Air Force. So at that time, I came into the cardiovascular lab at NASA Ames, and the guy I went to work for at that time, Dr. Uh, Ernest McCutcheon, was the director, and he wanted me to come in to be the engineering director and the lead engineer in the laboratory. But between the time I accepted the job and the time that I started there, he left, and there was a void as lab manager. So I ended up becoming the manager of the cardiovascular research lab at NASA Ames, which then evolved the Bion and the Cosmos project that I talked about. So many successive activities and different things there, various research activities, and I won't go into the whole succession and the flow, but it just goes to show that you never know where things are going to turn, or how you're going to get uh, where your direction is going to go, and where events may lead you to.
Yeah, that's definitely a testament to that statement. And it just shows, your journey can go in different ways that you don't even expect. I'm so glad that you were able to get involved in these different hands-on experiences and mentorship opportunities. I'm a strong believer that people learn better when they're in a project-based environment rather than just like a test content-based. So, I'm really glad that you had those opportunities. My next question for you is every story that I've heard so far, every journey I've heard has obstacles. So I'm curious to hear, did you have any obstacles when trying to pursue your passion? And if so, how were you able to overcome those obstacles?
Okay, well, so the first one was graduating from grad school. Okay, graduating from Stanford was an obstacle while working full time and going to school
Oh, wow.
half time. But but that also gave very great learning experiences because in a lot of cases, the things that I was tasked to work on were the things that I was learning in school, and I could really understand why I was studying those things and how to use those things. And of course, being at a world-class university, you were able to go ask some of the world's experts some of the kinds of things that needed to happen. Once you got into the workforce, one is the acceptance that the new ideas that you're thinking of or seeing or being exposed to can be brought into a regimented government like program. And then the other thing is if those types of programs didn't exist, how do you create the resources and create the capabilities to do the things that you've been exposed to that you really want to do? And when you become a program manager or project manager, one of the first things is, okay, how do you build a team and how do you pay for the team? So a lot of the obstacles was convincing senior management that some of these leading edge ideas that you've been exposed to are viable and could really work, and that you could do them within the time and cost schedule of a NASA research program. So how to get things done, convince senior management, how to be the bridge in between scientists, engineers, and program managers and do new things.
Yeah, definitely. This sounds, I mean, working in college while also studying in grad school definitely must have been a difficult challenge, but I'm glad that you were able to learn those skills and learn better, how to apply both real world skills to education. So that's awesome. And so, I'm curious to understand, were there any obstacles in terms of your background, your, ethnicity, any of that when you were trying to work in the space industry? Or did you find that all these stereotypes are pretty much, they don't exist? Because I feel like there's a lot of stereotypes about the space industry.
Well, I think there's a lot of stereotypes and realities, not just about the space industry, but just realities of existence in the 21st century right now, as it is. And I don't know if is this the venue to go into those kinds of things, so I won't. But the bottom idea is to keep your eye on the prize and to look ever forward and have confidence in yourself that no matter what the obstacles are, if you have a dream and you have the wherewithal and the capabilities to address them, then just keep going.
Those are amazing inspirational words. And so now that we kind of understood a little bit about your journey, your story, one of my last questions to you is, what advice do you have for young students around the world in regards to pursuing a passion in the space field, STEM field, something that you wish you knew when you were a younger student?
Well, I guess I would say is, don't take anything for granted. When you go through school and you're going through your studies, you find there are a lot of classes and courses and things that you are required to take that you really don't see the value of them. You don't really see how they will fit or why you should care or why you should think about them. And then you get later on and you say, oh, well, I really should have thought about that more. I wanted to be an electrical engineer and a circuit designer. That was my dream as an electrical engineer. I wanted to build boxes. That's still my passion. I build boxes. I build spaceflight boxes now. I build flight systems. But you know, uh, it's not all about the electronics. There's physics, there's science, there's chemistry, there's biology, there's management, there's interpersonal people interactions that you have to take into consideration. So don't take anything for granted, and see that everything you get exposed to has a value, and you have to put it in perspective and look at what your dream is and distill that into the respective pieces of what that dream means and what the components of that dream uh, would take to make them happen, and then pursue each of those building blocks step by step and put them all together.
That's amazing advice. As a student myself, sometimes you can get overwhelmed with everything that's happening around you, and you're like, "Oh, okay, I'm interested in engineering," and then okay, I don't like engineering more. I like biology, and so you kind of are trying to go into different categories when you can try to blend them and blend your interests together to form interdisciplinary careers. And I think that your journey, your careers that you've had in the past really shows that. So I want to thank you so much, Mr. Hines, for sharing about the Hines Family Foundation, your vision, and the story to inspire all. Thank you.
It's my honor and pleasure, and thank you. And I hope that some of the words and things that we've had here will have some benefit and have some value, and will inspire some others to follow some of the pathways that I've been exposed to.
Definitely. Thank you.